She sent 2 text messages that night. The first one says she was home safe, and the second was to a friend saying she sees a dark figure in the stairwell. This was the last time anyone heard from her. When her photographer showed up to her building the following day for a scheduled photo shoot, she wasn't there. Her dog was alone in the apartment and her phone had been discarded. She had simply vanished. What investigators would find out 1 week later, buried in a forest, would raise a question so disturbing that prosecutors are still struggling to answer it. This is the case of Stefanie Pieper. Picture this, you're in Austria, you're in the heart of Central Europe where the Alps give way to rolling green hills, and there's a city called Graz. It's just about an hour south of the Slovenian border. It's famous for Renaissance architecture, vibrant art scene, and the kind of energy that feels both cosmopolitan and deeply personal. Stefanie's world was rooted in Graz, specifically the Gradoff district, one of the city's leafier residential neighborhoods. On paper, it was exactly the kind of place where a young, ambitious woman like Stefanie could build her life. And that's precisely what she was doing. As I mentioned earlier, Graz is about an hour away from the Slovenian border. That proximity will become a critical piece of this story in ways that nobody could have predicted. Stefanie Pieper was by all accounts someone who poured herself into everything she did. At 31 years old, she had built a loyal following of nearly 50,000 people on Instagram. She earned that following the old-fashioned way through consistency, creativity, and her genuine personality. Her content centered around beauty, makeup, fashion, and lifestyle. But what people responded to most wasn't just the aesthetics, it was her. She was a professional makeup artist and a brand ambassador for IQ Beauty. She had even pursued music under the name Stefanie Peter Music. She also studied law at a nearby university. The people closest to her would describe Stefanie as someone who was warm, grounded, and family-oriented. She even had her mother's name tattooed on her left forearm. She loved her dog, family, friends, and colleagues. Stefanie was involved in an on-again, off-again relationship with a man identified as just Peter M., or Patrick M., as named in some Austrian outlets. Peter was 31 years old and didn't exactly have a thriving career. He worked part-time as a security guard at nightclubs and was reportedly an unsuccessful poker player. He had connections to Slovenia because his grandmother lived there in a small village. He also had family ties to a remote wooded area. At the time, that detail meant nothing to anyone, but it wouldn't stay that way for long. The relationship between Stefanie and Peter was very turbulent. On Saturday, November 22, 2025, Stefanie attended a Christmas party in Graz. She was out with friends celebrating the season. Around 7 a.m. the next day, Stefanie climbed into a taxi with the friend and headed back home. The taxi driver dropped her friend off and then later dropped Stefanie off at her apartment. She sent a WhatsApp message almost immediately after arriving saying that she was home and that she was safe. Minutes later came the second message. She texted her friend that she didn't feel safe because she saw a dark, creepy figure in the stairwell. Investigators believe that Stefanie eventually realized that that dark figure in the stairwell was Peter. Whether he had been waiting for her or followed her to the building has not been fully established. But what we do know is that he made it into her apartment. At approximately 8 a.m. that morning, neighbors reported hearing loud noises and an argument coming from inside Stefanie's apartment. The same neighbors allegedly witnessed shortly after a man leaving the building carrying what appeared to be a large, suspicious roll of fabric. That man was later identified to be Peter. At some point in the morning, Stefanie had suffered from severe injuries. The post-mortem examination confirmed massive trauma to her neck consistent with strangulation. Peter would later tell investigators that he had gotten into a fight that night with Stefanie. He claimed that she had grabbed a knife and attempted to harm herself and that he tried to stop her. He exerted pressure on her neck until she at some point stopped moving. Prosecutors and forensic experts have since made clear that the account just doesn't add up. The injuries that they found on Stefanie's body are not consistent with the scenario that Peter had described. In the hours that followed, Pieper did not act immediately. He left Stefanie's apartment and drove around for hours aimlessly. He then made the grim decision to conceal what he had done. He then returned to her apartment and retrieved a turquoise suitcase, the same one Stefanie used for her beauty work. He took the suitcase to the car, placed her inside of it, and he folded down the rear seat of the car to create enough room. He then drove south, crossing the border into Slovenia. His first stop was his grandmother's home in a small village just across the border. He buried the suitcase there, but something made him move it. Shortly after, he dug her up and carried her deeper into the forest to a second location. That was where she would remain for 5 days. Later that same morning, on Sunday, November 23rd, Stefanie failed to show up to a scheduled photo shoot. Her photographer, unable to reach her, went directly to her apartment building. He was already worried, and what he found there only deepened that concern. Inside the building, he unexpectedly came across Pieper. Pieper said he was at Stefanie's apartment to look after her dog Mario. The photographer called the police, and when they arrived, they did find Mario, but he was alone inside the apartment. They also found traces of blood near the door frame of the apartment. This was enough to raise questions, but not enough to make an arrest. Police searched the apartment and the surrounding area, and among what they found was Stefanie's phone thrown into a bush nearby. It hadn't been forgotten. It was taken by someone and discarded. By the time relatives and colleagues formally reported Stefanie as missing, the clock was already ticking. Pieper was already on the move. Investigators identified Pieper as a significant person of interest and were actively trying to locate him. His phone went unanswered and he was unreachable. On Monday evening, November 24th, Slovenian police reported something unusual. A car had caught fire in the parking lot of a casino near the Austrian-Slovenian border. It was identified as belonging to Pieper, and Pieper himself was found in the immediate vicinity of the burning vehicle. He couldn't explain the fire, so he was taken into custody by Slovenian police. Investigators quickly established that Pieper had crossed the Austrian-Slovenian border multiple times in the days following Stefanie's disappearance. The burning of the car, which authorities described as an apparent attempt to destroy evidence, only strengthened their suspicion. An extradition back to Austria was requested immediately. They knew Pieper had family ties to a wooded area, and that's exactly where they focused their search. Teams moved through the forest. Sniffer dogs were deployed and property was searched. At the time, they came up empty. Stefanie was not found. But here's the thing, they were actually in the right area, but they just didn't have the right coordinate. And without Pieper's cooperation, that forest was just too vast, dense, and too remote to pinpoint a buried suitcase. Pieper was extradited back from Slovenia to Austria. Surprisingly, Pieper quickly confessed. He gave them the exact coordinates where the suitcase was buried. Slovenian authorities went back into that forest, this time knowing exactly where to look. And there, buried in the earth, they found the turquoise suitcase. Inside was Stefanie Pieper, and it had been 5 days since she disappeared. Here's where the story takes a turn that has genuinely shaken investigators and the public alike. In December of 2025, initial autopsy reports confirmed that Stefanie had been subjected to violence prior to her death. That much was established early on. But in March of 2026, the Graz Police Prosecutor's Office released a new statement. The prosecutor assigned to the case stated publicly that the post-mortem exam could not definitively determine when Stefanie had died. He said it was entirely possible that she was buried alive. Pieper remains in pre-trial detention, and his trial is expected to take place later on this year. If convicted, he faces life imprisonment. 2 of Pieper's relatives are suspected of having helped him bury the body, but no charges have formally been filed.